the gulf between values and outcomes. That is the heart of it. You've got these people on the left who go on and on about social justice and fairness and public safety, but actually, when you look at their record, what they actually do, it's completely the opposite. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. There was an article this weekend in the New York Times by a writer who I mostly disagree with, sometimes agree with, but who I find always writes thoughtfully and seriously. And what he wrote this weekend is incredibly serious, incredibly relevant to a lot of the things we talk about on this show. And I'm going to tell you what he said in a moment. It was actually a very significant moment. But before that, I want to get to a story that's really broken this morning. I'm actually taping this at the beginning of the week on Monday, Monday, June the 17th, and we've just been informed by the Biden campaign that they are spending $50 million. That is more than they raised at their ridiculous Hollywood fundraiser, where Biden had to be escorted off the stage. Another embarrassing kind of catastrophe for this idea that Biden knows what he's doing and is capable of doing the job of the president. This time he was actually escorted off the stage by his predecessor. So last week he was escorted off by, it was the Prime Minister of Italy when he was sort of wandering around, and people said, oh, that's taken out of context. That video was taken out of context at the G7. So, okay, here we go. Back at the Hollywood fundraiser, back here in America. So what's the context that explains this? He's there on the stage again, totally clueless, doesn't know what to do, and gently, like the sort of, sad old grandpa that he is, he has to be escorted off. Obama comes along, takes him off the stage, totally humiliating. So the amount of money they raised at that fundraiser, apparently we're told, is $30 million. $30 million, the biggest ever fundraising total for any Democratic event in history. But they're about to splurge all of that and more on an ad campaign that they've been very, very excited to share with the world. And here is the ad that, as they say, is probably coming to you this summer, thanks to all that money from George Clooney and his pals raked in by Biden. Let's take a look at the ad.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering healthcare costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
All right, so the first thing to say is, just at the moment when we're all getting ready for a lovely summer and spending time outdoors with our friends and family, and July the 4th is coming up and it's going to be a great summer, here comes Joe Biden and his cronies to ruin our summer with a miserable, negative, nasty campaign ad costing tens of millions of dollars to just make sure that in case we feel too happy and too much enjoyment with the sunshine and all the rest of it, they're there to ruin our spirits with this dark, menacing, nasty campaign ad. Thanks a lot, Joe Biden. The more serious point, of course, is that this ad reveals two very significant things about the Biden campaign. One of them very disturbing, the other just, what we've known all along. It's obvious he's got nothing to say about the future, no positive message, no reason to vote for him. There's no outline of the Biden second term ideas that are going to transform America, nothing. He's got literally nothing to say about why you should give him another 4 years. It is empty. There is nothing there. Just as there's nothing there when you see Biden talking, nothing behind his eyes, this sort of glazed look all the time. There's nothing there politically. There's nothing there policy-wise. There is no idea, no agenda for the future. That's what this ad from the Biden campaign tells us. There is nothing positive. There's no positive reason to vote for this man. It's all about negativity. But the really disturbing thing, when you look at the nature of the negativity in this ad, what are they saying? They are saying, don't vote for Trump because he's a convicted criminal. And there you have it. Basically, the Biden campaign admitting what Trump said all along. that this whole process of these cases, the New York ones, the other stuff that's going on, all the legal cases, all the indictments and the prosecutions, they've only got one conviction so far. And the minute they get that conviction, bang, there it is in a campaign ad for the Biden campaign. I mean, they're basically admitting that the whole thing was political, the whole prosecution cooked up so that it could end up in a campaign ad. That was the point all along. That's what Trump said all along. And now here they are basically admitting it. I mean, for all the period of the case, and actually the other case as well, the briefing from the White House and from Biden most of the time was, well, he's not going to comment on it. He's busy getting on with being president and so on, trying to kind of send this high-minded tone of we're not going to exploit this for political purposes. But the minute they get the conviction, there it is in their campaign ad, not just any campaign ad, a massive amount of spending, $50 million on this one ad. And it just shows you it really was political all along. That was the idea, to get to the point where they could call Trump a convicted criminal and put it in one of their ads. It is absolutely disgusting. And all their talk about, defending our democracy and democratic norms and the rule of law, all of it is absolute garbage when you see what they're doing, corrupting and perverting our legal process to try and cling on to power. What a disgrace Biden and these Democrats are. And this latest ad proves it. All right, let's get to that article I mentioned at the top of the show in the Sunday Times, the New York Times this weekend, by this journalist who, as I mentioned, don't always agree with him, but he always writes thoughtfully. He's a serious guy. He's not a political hack. And actually, this really proves that. He's on the left. He's very open about that. He's called Nicholas Kristof, Kristof. And he actually he tried to run for governor in his home state of Oregon as a Democrat, but he was kicked off the ballot for some kind of, administrative reason. So he's a thoughtful guy and he cares about policy. And I always read his columns and I always learn something. And this week he wrote something that was just so good and so revealing. And I want to talk about it a bit because it gets to the heart of what's gone wrong here in California, but actually it's beyond California, as the title of this article conveys. What have we liberals done to the West Coast? Here's the opening sentence. As Democrats make their case to voters around the country this fall, one challenge is that some of the bluest parts of the country, cities on the West Coast, are a mess. Centrist voters can reasonably ask, why put liberals in charge nationally when the places where they have greatest control are plagued by homelessness, crime, and dysfunction? I mean, there you have it. That's what we've been saying all along. It is absolutely clear and true. And finally, we have someone on the left, a Democrat, who's openly saying this. It's a really, really important moment. And I did see that it got a lot of engagement. A lot of people on the left actually saying, thank you, this is a wake-up call. And the thing that's really interesting about it is his analysis of what's gone wrong, because it really, really is in line with some of the things that I've been saying for so long, particularly about what's going on here in California. But again, I just want to read you pieces of this article because it's really stunning to see this in the New York Times from a writer who is a Democrat. Liberals like me do need to face the painful fact that something has gone badly wrong where we are in charge, from San Diego to Seattle. I'm an Oregonian who bores people at cocktail parties by singing the praises of the West. But the truth is that too often we offer a version of progressivism that doesn't result in progress. I mean, listen to that. That is such a great point, isn't it? So often I don't even like saying, using their language when the far left talk about themselves as progressives. I often say, well, no, we shouldn't use that term. We shouldn't let them use that term because there isn't any progress being made. And here he is saying this. We are more likely to believe, we the liberals, progressives, we are more likely, he uses that term interchangeably, we are more likely to believe that, quote, housing is a human right than conservatives in Florida or Texas, but less likely to actually get people housed. We accept a yawning gulf between our values and our outcomes. And that is the heart of it. the gulf between values and outcomes. And this is what I've been saying for so long. You've got these people on the left who endlessly, go on and on about social justice and fairness and public safety and, of course, defending our democracy and all these things. But actually, when you look at their record, what they actually do, it's completely the opposite. And this is just, it's so central to our argument about change to understand this, because a thing that people say about election campaigns and winning elections. I think I certainly heard Tony Blair say this to me, um, which is, in order to persuade people of your argument, you've got to say things that a reasonable person would go along with. Of course, you have, highly engaged partisans, and they're prepared to believe anything about the other side because they're real fans, right? And they want their team to win. But elections are often determined by people in the middle who are not particularly political, and they don't really follow it that closely. And so you've got to say things in a way that's reasonable and and strikes a chord. And that's why one of the things I've said for so long is that actually it's with the left these days, it's so much about what they say. I mean, we used to use the term virtue signaling, and I say, well, it's not really virtue signaling because there's nothing virtuous about it, but it is about, for them, sending a message. That's what it's, rather than the outcome. It's about the ideology. It's ideology signaling. I've used that phrase, which is, as long as you say the right things and sign up to the right causes and chant the right slogans and post the right things on your social media, if you're on the left, then what actually happens as a result of your policies in the real world doesn't really matter. And here's Nick Kristof really, really calling that out. So let's go back to his article. Why does Democratic Party governance seem less effective on the West Coast than on the East Coast? He's pointing out that actually some of the blue states on the East Coast don't have the catastrophic outcomes that you see here in California and Washington and Oregon and so on. And here he is saying, sometimes I wonder if the West is less serious about policy than the East and less focused on relying on the most rigorous evidence. My take is that the West Coast's central problem is not so much that it's unserious as that it's infected with an ideological purity that is focused more on intentions than on oversight and outcomes. That is so true. As long as you have the right intentions, everything's fine. Politics always is part theatre, but out west, too often we, the left, settle for being performative rather than substantive. This is brilliant. Listen to this. I didn't even know this until I read this article. He's from Oregon, remember. For example, as a gesture to support trans kids, Oregon took money from the tight education budget to put tampons in boys' restrooms in elementary schools, including boys' restrooms in kindergartens. And then he quotes a local legislator, Earl Blumenauer, who's a Democrat who's represented Portland, says apparently for more than half a century. Here's a quote from that representative, a Democrat congressman. Quote, the inability of progressives, particularly in the Portland metro area, to deal with the nitty-gritty of governing and to get something done is just staggering. He goes on to say people are much more interested in ideology than in actual results. Exactly. This is exactly what I've been saying for so long. Here's another terrible example from this article, something called the Portland Freedom Fund, which is all about paying bail for people of color. So here we are in 2022. This fund helped a black man named Mohammed Adan, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Adan, who'd been arrested after allegedly strangling his former girlfriend, holding a gun to her head, and then, in violation of a restraining order, cutting off his GPS monitor and entering her building. He told me he would kill me, the former girlfriend, Rachel Abraham, warned. The Freedom Fund, this left-wing group, paid Aidan's bail and he walked out of jail. A week later, Aidan allegedly removed his GPS monitor again and entered his former girlfriend's home. The police found her body drenched in blood with a large knife nearby. 3 children were also in the house. The incident prompted soul searching in Portland, but perhaps not enough. A well-meaning effort to help people of color may have cost the life of a woman of color. And that's the story, isn't it? All these things that defund the police and so on, it actually ends up hurting the exact people that they claim to want to help. We see that in economic policy, in criminal justice policy, social policy. It is absolutely clear. And this is the clearest I've ever seen anyone on the left actually admit that. He talks about another issue, very much one that I've focused on. Again, and remember, a phrase I use all the time when I talk about policy is positive and practical, right? Let's do things that are practical, that work in the real world, and that are positive, not ideological. And here we are. Housing is an issue that I spent a lot of time on. Here he is talking about that in this article. What matters is improving opportunities and quality of life. And the best path to do that is a relentless empiricism, a fancy word, I would say, for being practical, which clashes with the West Coast indifference to the laws of economics. You can say that again. The basic reason for homelessness on the West Coast, Nick Kristof writes, is an enormous shortage of housing that drives up rents. California lacks about 3 million housing units, in part because it's difficult to get permission to build. As long as there's a vast shortage, housing is like musical chairs. Move one family into housing and another won't get a home. Public sector efforts to build housing are often ruinously expensive, with, quotes, affordable housing sometimes costing more than $1 million per unit. So the private sector is critical. Yet one element of progressive purity is suspicion of the private sector, and this hobbles efforts to make businesses part of the solution. Here's something I didn't know. Business owners who earn an income from their company are effectively barred from serving on the Portland City Council. My goodness, reading this article, you think we got it bad here in California. My God, Portland sounds even more of a nightmare. And then here's the final point that I want to get to, and something that I've spoken about a lot in terms of why things are so bad here. And it is the fact that here in California, for example, we've had this one party state. The Democrats have run everything for so long, nearly 20 years, total freedom, and it makes them freedom to do whatever they want, and it makes them arrogant and complacent. And actually, that's another point that Nick Kristof makes, which is very powerful coming from a Democrat. He's actually calling in this article for more political competition to raise the quality of the game, the policy game of the left. I'll quote again from the article. Perhaps on the West Coast, we have ideological purity because there isn't much political competition. Republicans are irrelevant in much of the far West, so they can't hold Democrats' feet to the fire, leading Democrats to turn to wander unchecked farther to the left. That is exactly the dynamic we see here, where it's all about outcompeting themselves to be more and more far left. Maybe a healthy Republican Party keeps the Democratic Party healthy, and vice versa. We need to get our act together. Absolutely. Less purity and more pragmatism would go a long way, but perhaps the first step must be the humility to acknowledge our failures. I mean, that is exactly right. And this is the thing that's so infuriating often from the left these days, is that even when they kind of implicitly admit they got things wrong, as we're seeing with things like the school closures and the lockdown, they never actually say it. They never actually have the humility to admit when they were wrong. And that is what is so depressing about the left generally, but also so encouraging about this article. Now, my take on it, of course, is that actually there's that last point, political competition, that will really bring things back. And that's why I'm so engaged in the fight for a positive alternative here in California, because I think that in the end is the only way to get to the kind of positive and practical policy making that is so sorely missing. All right, well, I'm very excited to say it's now time for California Corner with Jennifer Horn. Jen, great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm great. Great to see you too.
So, by the way, just in case people aren't doing this, I want to make sure they're all aware that I join you every Friday morning on AM 870, The Morning Answer. But you're there every morning. That's why it's called The Morning
That's right.
Answer with
And we
Grant.
have all the answers with
Exactly.
well,
You have all
Grant,
the
not so many answers, but I
um,
have them all.
Grant Sinchfield, and we always have fun. And I can only imagine what fun you have for all the many, many hours that I'm not with you on that show. So everyone should
You
check
well,
that out.
I want to tell you that we actually your ears might have been burning today because we were actually talking about our guest with the best sense of humor. And you were actually at the top of both of our lists. So it was very fun. We were both like, he's like, who's the one that's got the best sense of humor? We went through and don't tell our other guests because we love them all. But here we are broadcasting it out on your podcast. But I said, Steve Hilton. He's like, oh yeah, Steve's at the top of the list. So we always love having you because here's the thing. We are all about saving California. We all are very serious in that fight. But at the same time, if you don't have fun and if you don't make the movement exciting, people are
Yes,
not going to want to come with you. So
exactly. I always
We
say
gotta
that
have some fun.
we got to have fun, and like I always say this. Funny enough, when I'm making kind of when I'm talking to events about how we kind of, win in California and all the rest of it, I say,
Yeah.
look, we got to do it with a smile on our face. Yes, of course, we got to be angry. There's lots to be angry about. I get it, but honestly, just think about it in a human way. If you're at dinner with someone, or you meet someone in a party or whatever, you don't just start sort of screaming at them, right? That's just not how we operate.
It's not a
In
great tactic for influencing
Exactly.
people now.
You don't do that. You just sort of try and be charming and whatever and chat and persuade people like everything's so terrible. Like, oh my God, who's this guy? I'm leaving.
Give him the full Mark Levin, hour number 2, halfway through when he's getting real fired up.
Oh,
No, I think you
exactly.
really do have to bring people in with charm, and we have to sell people on ourselves, right? And sell them on the ideas, because people, I
Exactly.
guarantee you, people don't go, "Oh, I just have to do what XYZ politician says." No, they're going to do what Steve tells me, my friend Steve or my friend Jen. And that's how you bring
Great
people
point.
along in a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
movement.
And we've
Yeah.
got that's the right word, movement. That's why actually, funnily enough, we chose that word very consciously. If people go to goldentogether.com, my kind of policy
Mhm.
organization for California, literally on the homepage, it says a movement to restore the California dream. That is what we're trying to do.
That's
But
right.
we don't have the California dream let's get angry, has been destroyed by, by the Democrats. So how are people that's our first story today. How are people in California feeling about the people in charge right now? There's a new poll.
Not great. Yes, sorry, there is a new poll. I interrupted, but they're not feeling great, Steve. That's the answer. It's the PPIC poll that has asked people about the right direction of the state, how many people think we're going in the right direction, how many people love Gavin Newsom, and the answer is that's not great either. So right now, this new PPIC poll found out that 6 in 10 California voters say the state is going in the wrong direction. 6 in 10.
That's up from what it was before.
Yeah, they also disapprove of the state legislature and of the legislators that are representing their assembly and Senate districts. A majority of adults and likely voters disapprove, 4 in 10 approve of their legislature and the legislators that represent them. Close to 7 in 10, 68%, expect bad economic times in the next year. 42% of Californians say that the state's budget situation is a big problem. More than a third of Californians say their personal financial situation is worse than it was just a year ago. And a majority of Californians say the cost of housing places at least a little financial strain on them with their families. 29% say a lot, 24% say a little. Now, it's pretty interesting to even see how Gavin Newsom is doing in all of this. And I think it's interesting to see his approval with the state, because there are a lot of people on the national level who say if Joe Biden isn't the candidate, he's going to get helicoptered out and they're going to helicopter someone new in. And that may be true. We could argue about whether that's right or wrong. We won't know until we see it. But Gavin Newsom is, of course, high on that list. But Steve, I actually have faith in the rest of the country. And I think, sadly, California has turned into a bit of a laughing stock. And with some of these numbers and just really intuition, I think people in Indiana don't want to California their state. And I think that
Yeah.
voters outside of California don't look at us as the model of what to do with the country, which I think is the biggest negative that Gavin Newsom's going to have to overcome in that front. And he's not even popular in the state. Even Democrats disapprove of him at this point. He's underwater with independents and Republicans, and even most Democrats in the state of
So
California.
there's a
So,
majority disapproval even among
yeah,
Democrats.
even
That's
on the
super
Democrat
interesting.
side, which is
Really
huge.
interesting.
I think so too. And I think it just shows that what's happening in California is not appreciated by any political group, because we have crime and we have homelessness and we have
Yeah.
economic issues, and the strain is real. And that's all leads back to the person in charge. And he's been there for such a long time, not just as governor, but as lieutenant governor. And before that, mayor of San Francisco. He's made a ton of promises to fix problems, and the problems have just exploded under his leadership.
It's interesting. It feels like the reality is just catching up with him,
Yeah.
with the Democrats, just generally, because for the longest time, those of us who followed this would say, "Oh my goodness, like, but it's so bad. Everything's going in the wrong direction. What's happening? Why do people still keep voting for them?" And it feels like that is turning. It's changing. It's got so bad for so long, and it's so obvious. that there's no one else to blame. They've been in power without any checks or balances from Republicans in the state legislature or statewide for like nearly 20 years. And so who
Yeah.
else is there to blame? It really connects actually to what I was just talking about earlier in the show, which is this article from Nick Kristof in the Sunday Times, which is, what have we liberals done to the West Coast? I think, even Democrats are waking up to that now. And it's this gulf between what you hear in their rhetoric and what you and all their, our values and social justice and this and that, whatever. And then you look around and everything's collapsing in crime and
Yep.
chaos and dysfunction. And so that gap is now being reflected in the polling. It is very interesting. Any interesting things about this year's races? I think they did they test the Schiff Garvey race,
They did. So here's what well, first of all, they did Joe Biden and Donald Trump, which is, as you would expect, not favorable to Donald Trump. Joe
right?
Biden is beating Trump 55-31.
Okay,
And Adam Schiff is leading Steve Garvey 62-37 in the Senate race. 93% of Democrats favor Schiff. 90% of Republicans favor Garvey, and independents, and this is the interesting piece. Independents are or a lot closer, at least. Schiff has 53% and Garvey has 45% of independents, which is not where you want to be if you're Steve Garvey, but there is an opportunity. At least you're not down 93% like he is with Democrats favoring Schiff. I would just like to see, and I've talked about this before. I know that there is a strategy probably developed by people who, are much more successful than me in the political vein. But I would just say, as someone standing from the outside, I get that people don't want to be pigeonholed by President Trump because he's not popular in California. But I do think that there is a real opportunity to say, why not try something different? And that goes for anybody who's running for any office as a Republican in California. If you have the backbone, you can stand up and say, people have been voting for the same stuff for
I
20
agree
years
with
and
that.
it's not working. So come on out, try something new. Let's see if we can make things better. And yes, a Senate position is going to be dealing with a lot of national issues, but you still have to deliver results for your constituents and represent your constituents proudly. And I think the question for Adam Schiff, because he's been my congressman, so I know the answer, is what have you done in the House of Representatives? What have you done there that actually has returned something to the state of California? Or have you used this position to gain more power for yourself and just grind axes politically? Because
Exactly.
that
Well, that's what
really
he
is
is.
what he's done and is a political axe grinder. And he hasn't performed well. So if that's his weak spot, he's got a brand name, people know about him, but they know about him because he has been going after his political foes instead of actually getting real results. So
Yeah.
I would say pick away at that scab. If I were giving any, if I were chatting with Steve Garvey, I would tell him that because I'd like to see him win. I'd like to see him at least make it competitive. And right now, the numbers say that it's really not.
Well, yeah, we've got time. I mean,
Hmm.
people aren't focused on these elections yet. I remember in the Senate primary, Steve Garvey was a long way behind, and then he came up and actually
Sure.
won the primary. He did very well in that primary in the end. And so, well, I think after September, typically that's when people really focus. So then we'll have a real look at this. But I agree with you. And Schiff, my goodness, he's such a big target. I mean, this guy's a
Yeah.
pathological liar. Shifty Schiff is his name for a reason, right?
Right.
He really is one of the worst examples of everything that's negative and depressing about politics. He's a total political opportunist and a hack in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's done some things. Let's be fair that he's been diligent about this or that. I don't want to say that he's done nothing at all that's serious or substantive, but certainly what he's lent into in terms of what he wants to project on the national stage, and he's running for Senate again, the national stage, is just so divisive and negative and dishonest
That's
fundamentally. So
right.
I don't know. I think there's a lot to go for there. On the substance, I want to move to this story, which was, again, something that we sort of feel and you could have predicted, but it kind of fits in with this, point that I've made before in this show, and I say everywhere I go, which is that it really is, the performance of these far left policies, the outcomes that have arisen as a result of the 20-year political monopoly, 20-year or so political monopoly for the far left Democrats. It's really, really bad. It's not just a little bit bad. On so many of these indicators, we are literally at the bottom of every list that you want to be the top of. and top of every list you want to be the bottom of. And just all the time new examples of that come up. I mean, we've talked about it many times. We have the highest taxes and the worst poverty rate and the highest housing costs and the worst business climate, all that stuff. Here's a new report which is again a really depressing one, actually, if you think about it. California ranks bottom third in overall child well-being. Child well-being. So this is a non-profit, and they do analysis of all different kind of aspects of child well-being. So education, economic well-being, health, family, community. Um, and it's just really bad. 43rd of all states in economic well-being, and so on. I mean, it's just really, really depressing, especially when you consider how much money we spend. That's
I
the other
know.
thing. And it's our money, it's taxpayer money. The budget's totally out of whack. They've more than trebled the budget, as I've pointed out, in the last, 15 years or so. So all this money that's risen as a result of which we have the highest taxes. And where's it ended up? With like bottom third for child well-being. There's a terrible statistic on chronic absenteeism. This is a real disaster in the making. We should spend time on this another time. Um, One of the worst in the country, missing chronic absenteeism from school. This because this report's all about children, is defined as missing 10% or more of the school year. That's what the definition is. The percentage of this is an amazing number. The percentage of chronically absent students in California, guess what the number is? 30%.
Wow, that's
30%. So a
huge.
third of kids in California schools are defined as chronically absent. I mean, what's
You know,
going on?
well, well, a lot of things I think is the answer, but I'd actually look back to COVID a little bit because don't forget, and I know you know this because you were
Exactly.
here, Steve, but California had kids out of school for almost 2 years of their education. So what does that teach us? Our behavior. I'd be really curious to know what the numbers from 2018,
I can
2019
tell
looked
you.
like.
I have it for you right here.
Tell me.
12.1%.
Yeah. Because guess what? We've changed behaviors now. So now
Yeah.
when a kid says they have a sniffle, or when a kid says, "Oh, I just don't feel like going to school today. I'm just so sick." Parents have been conditioned that staying home is okay. Kids have been now predispositioned into saying that they don't have to be in the classroom all the time. And even the schools are saying if you have a sniffle, if you have a headache, just stay home. It's probably better and safer, right? So I think that this is a huge link to our behavior, which is inexcusable, our behavior during the COVID pandemic, and tells you how psychologically it has impacted kids, school teachers, administrators, and parents themselves because we've changed our behavior. I remember when I was a kid and I had a stuffy nose, and I'd always try to pull that card. Oh, I just want to stay home today. And my mom would say, no, unless you have a fever, you're
Yes,
going to school. That
exactly.
doesn't happen anymore. And I really think it's because we changed so many behaviors with COVID. And then I think you have to add in the financial issues, the socioeconomic issues that are happening in California. And if they do have a two-parent household, which of course is just a sign culturally of the times where many kids don't have a two-parent household, but even if they do, both parents are having to work all day and they're not able to keep an eye on their kids. So you have a lot of kids who are suffering loneliness because they're sitting at home all summer long or after school and they don't have anybody watching over them because of the financial issues of living in the state of California. And I mean, think about it. It is a different mindset post COVID in our state. And then when you talk about the safety and the health of our kids, how many kids do you think are getting let out into the street to go play like we used to do when we were young? Not many because the streets aren't safe anymore. So then you have the safety issues, kids staying indoors, playing video games instead of running around and playing basketball on the street. It's a combination of issues and it's not surprising. And then you have to talk about the health of the schools. And the schools aren't healthy. In a lot of cases, they're just babysitters for a few hours every day. Our public school system is failing, and we spend so much money on it, but we're getting no results, and no one wants to be brave enough to make any changes.
Beautifully put. I think we should put you in charge. That was so great. Everything you just
You're
said.
so sweet.
So
I'll be
right.
happy to be in charge, but it's just, I mean, it's
No,
really
but it's
sad
right because
because
the
it's
way you
common
laid it out,
sense.
exactly, common sense and very practical. Like this is what I was again talking about this earlier about the Nick Kristof article. The reason things have gone so off track is because the far left now, the Democrats are so ideological, whereas everything you spoke about is incredibly down to earth, common sense, and practical, and we've just lost sight of that. There
Yeah.
is one thing though I want to move to, which is a bit to me it's surprising because it's kind of practical and not ideological, and it's coming from, of all places, the LA Unified School District. They've got a new proposal on phones, which I was really intrigued by.
Yeah, this story just started to break, and LA Unified is already out for the summer, but they're playing with the idea of limiting cell phones on campus coming up in the fall, and I actually think it's a wonderful idea. I think
Yeah,
that believe me, I understand parents are scared to send their kids without a way to get a hold of them because of the crime situation that we have. But if you are going to send your kids to school, send them with a flip phone because these smartphones take away their concentration. They give them something else to focus on. One of the most horrific stories I just heard from a teenage girl in my family is that she was feeling isolated and didn't have any friends. And I said, "Well, what do you do during lunch or nutrition?" And she said, "Oh, I play on my phone and I don't talk to anybody." These devices are isolating. And they also, I mean, there's a million other reasons not to have them because people can cheat with them and all of this, but more than anything, they are allowing kids a distraction that really is harming them psychologically. My mom was an LA Unified School District teacher and she retired a few years ago, but already cell phones were kind of in play when she was teaching. And she said kids would use them to cheat off tests and they'd have them under their desk and they'd take pictures of questions and send them to their friends. It's enough. If you need to have a way to get a hold of your kids, use a flip phone. But smartphones, I really agree with LA Unified. And I can't believe I'm
I know
saying
it's
it.
amazing, isn't it? But
Yeah,
we got
and
to be
you do
fair.
that
We
with your
we
kids, right?
Yes, and not only like me, right? So so people I've talked about this many times. So just in case people haven't heard it, for 12 years I didn't have a phone at all. No phone, no cell phone since we moved here from England. Now I'm on the road a lot, up and down California, with Golden Together and so on. So it's just hard. So I've made reluctantly a concession to the modern world, and I have now got a cell phone, and I'm going to show it to you. Here it is. This is can you see this? I'm flipping the
Oh,
flip
you've got
phone.
the flip
I
phone,
got the
that's
flip
right.
phone. There we are.
There you go. So
So
you've got a dumb phone that works just
yes,
fine to keep you
and it
connected.
keep you in touch, and that's all, of course, it's not the same, but to
Right.
me, that's all you exactly for kids, you don't need anything more. I've been arguing this for, like, nearly a decade. So my book, More
Mhm.
Human, came out in 2015, first time in the UK, then later on here. In 2015, in that book, I made the argument that the kids should not have smartphones, and I was very particular to say smartphones, not
Mhm.
phones. I get it. You want to keep in touch, give them a flip phone. Why do you need? I mean, the way I put it was that smartphones are kind of constant unsupervised access to the internet, and you don't want
Yes.
that. I mean, it's terrible, some of the things, and the distraction and so on. Now, what's interesting is that, I mean, I'm really glad to see LAUSD doing this. That's great. It's already been done. I think the first state where this started to happen was Florida, and already it's been put into action, and you've got great results. There's now real evidence from schools that have
Yep.
done this in the last couple of years of a transformation in the school culture. Less bullying, more interaction, more energy. It's just a positive thing. And so this is great to hear. And we should give credit where credit's due, unlike with our final story today, which is an amazing one. Again, related to a school policy, but not of the kind that any of us would approve of. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so I have to say, full disclosure, I'm a Catholic school kid. My mom, even though she was an LA Unified School District teacher, made sure that she had enough money to send me to Catholic school because she didn't trust the public school system. So I went to Catholic school all 12 years. And so I was really shocked because I believe I was a little naive thinking that it's just the big bad public schools that were engaging in ridiculous behavior. But apparently the Catholic schools are saying, hold my beer. We're going to do it too. So in Huntington Beach, which is a conservative pocket
Yes,
of Southern California, you've got the St. Bonaventure School, which is a kindergarten through 8th grade. And the story is of Jimmy Hayward, who's this 7th grade kid who was running for Commissioner of School Spirit and Patriotism. And so he comes up with a speech and he has to submit it for approval to the school administrators. And they told him to soften it and make it less patriotic, even though he's running for commissioner of patriotism. So he took out some of the I guess, some of the stronger words, which I think he had hate written in there once or something. So he took that out, but he went to his parents and he said, I'm running for patriotism, so I'd like to leave this stuff in. Well, the parents said, "We agree, you should do that." So the kid went and tried to read his speech. They sat him down. They wouldn't let him deliver, I guess, the rest of his speech. He was really embarrassed. The mom kind of, pushed and defended her child, I think, as she should have, and put a change.org petition up to try to get the principal fired for this behavior or removed. And so the principal thanked her with an expulsion letter for Jimmy Hayward and his
amazing.
two younger sisters, a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old girl who had nothing to do with the situation. And Steve, on the morning answer, we played the speech because I wanted to hear what was so dang controversial. And he's got all these great ideas about improving pep rallies and planting new flowers in the flower beds. And his last statement, what they thought was so controversial, is that he said that he wanted to bring people in who were victims of 9/11, who were victims of Japanese internment, who were victims of all these different world events, and bring them in to connect them personally to the students. He said he was tired of seeing people eat nachos during the national anthem at ball games, and that when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, you should
Right.
actually take seriously the words that you say. And for that, and he ended it with, I want to make school spirit great again. I want to make St. Bonaventure great again. So maybe because he used a Trumpism, maybe that offended them. But what is offensive about saying we need to take seriously the Pledge of Allegiance to our country that
Yes.
gifts us all this freedom?
It's amazing. I'm so glad you brought this up because we haven't talked about it on this show, but I actually met him on another show. I was on with Trace Gallagher on Fox News at night from LA a few weeks ago actually, and I it was the funniest thing because I thought, wait, what? Who's this? It was because it's an evening show, and I was going into I sort of dropped my head in to say hi to one of the makeup artists, and in the
Uh-huh.
chair was this young kid. And
You're
I
like,
thought,
wait a minute.
well, that's interesting because, like, often, during the day, I guess, I've sometimes you see kids, the parents are coming in to do something and they bring the kid or whatever. This is like at night. So, okay, that's interesting. And why is he in the chair? Little did I realize that he was the guest, right? And he was on to talk about it. And we had a chat, and he's an amazing, amazing young man. And
His speech made me wanna cry. He
it
made me
was
remember
amazing.
again about why we should appreciate being American citizens. I mean, what a
Exactly.
beautiful kid and a breath of fresh air. And it's just so sad he's punished for it.
I mean, I say the whole time actually when I speak at events, and often we start with a pledge. I've been asked to lead the pledge, which is an incredible honor, as a new American citizen.
Sure.
And I say to everyone, don't forget this. Don't let this go because the fact that we all stand and say the pledge, and it's so short and simple, but so profound. That doesn't happen in other countries. It's just not a part of the tradition in other countries. You never see that in England. And even, I for many years I worked in the Conservative Party. I did like hundreds and hundreds of political events for conservatives. Never once did we do anything like that. And it's such a really amazing thing that should bring us together. The words and the sentiment are so beautiful and shouldn't be at all controversial.
That's right.
Liberty and justice for all. I mean, who on earth would disagree with that? And so I
It's
just
what
think
we should
it's,
all be fighting for every
of
single day.
course, of course. And so I think this is really great that the parents and he's out there speaking out about this, not letting it slide, because I'm sure there are
Yeah.
things like this that happen all the time that we end up not being aware of. And this school should be ashamed of what they did. And I'm very, very pleased that we're talking about it, and good for him.
I think, you know what, sometimes you get punished for things and it's not right. And I know just talking about this on the morning answer, we had some people call in that said they had already called the school to lodge a complaint. And so, if one person hears this podcast, if one person hears my radio show, if one person hears something and we can make a change. I mean, now I don't know if I'd want my kid to go to a school that didn't support those principles, to be honest. I mean, I can probably think his parents might be thinking about other educational goals. But you know what? That's the power in telling people these stories because you've got to celebrate the people who are getting it right. And this kid, amazing,
Yeah,
amazing kid.
exactly. Well, that was a great way to end. I really, really appreciate that we got the chance to talk about that and everything else, Jen. Always fantastic to see you.
Always
Make sure
fun
you check
talking to
out
you.
Jen on AM 870 The Morning Answer, and we'll see you back here soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so there's just a few things I want to get off my chest just to end the show today about this Hunter Biden situation and the verdict and all the rest of it. And lots of things have been said about it, but there's a few things that just have really, really annoyed me actually about the response to what we saw with his trial and conviction, because it's so dishonest and cynical and manipulative. Some of the commentary that we're seeing, which is trying to really take this in a completely different direction from the right way we should be looking at it. So here's a headline from the New York Times that kind of captures what I'm talking about. Biden's love for his son is beautiful and it hits home for me. And so that's the sort of flavor of what you've been seeing from the left, which is this is just a family tragedy, and he was an addict, and Biden loves his son, and isn't that wonderful that he loves his son, and all the rest of it. And it's outrageous for the Republicans to be attacking Hunter Biden for his addiction or attacking Joe Biden for supporting his son through addiction. That's not what's happening at all. That is totally dishonest. Okay. I mean, I talk about this all the time. I say over and over again, family is the most important thing in my life, and it should be the most important thing in our nation's life. Of course, that's all true. But what's going on with the Bidens is not about love. It's about the family business. And the next trial, the tax one, absolutely brings that home. I mean, yes, okay. It's great when a father loves his son and vice versa. But honestly, it is not normal and not fine when a son exploits his father's public office for personal financial gain and then spreads the wealth around through other family members. And it's not okay when the father is fully aware of what's going on and the corruption involved in that, and then covers for his son and lies about it to this day. And even this particular case, the one we've just had, where when the details of this first came out, the father, the loving father, great loving father, but ended up on a debate stage in our general election, choosing our next president, lying through his teeth, denying that this had anything to do with his son and calling it Russian disinformation. That's not normal love for your son. That is cynical, disreputable political spin and manipulation, lying. So let's not have any more of this crap about how this whole thing is about Hunter Biden's addiction and Joe Biden's love. No, this is, as I said all along, even when the phrase Hunter Biden, when you talk about Hunter Biden laptop, as if the interest here is the salacious interest in what he did when he was in the throes of addiction. So no, it's not about that. It is about the evidence of Joe Biden's corruption. That's what this is all about. And they tried to pretend it was Russian. They deliberately lied in an operation that was orchestrated by Antony Blinken, now our Secretary of State, who organized this letter from the 50 or 51, however many it was, former intelligence chiefs, and then Biden uses it. And specifically, they organized the letter. We know all this now from emails that have been released. They organized the letter, trashing the evidence of Joe Biden's corruption in this laptop that produced the evidence for a lot of this stuff that we're seeing on trial now, both the one we've just seen and the one that's coming up, in order to give Joe Biden something to say in the debate. That's literally why they did it. It's in all the emails back and forth, organizing this letter. And it did work. And he did use it in the debate to cover up and lie and deflect from the truth about his own corruption and his family's corruption and the corruption between him and the son he loved so much. Great. Love your son, but don't work with him to exploit public office for private gain. That's the real story here. Biden family corruption. And don't let all this media commentary defending the Bidens try and deflect you from that. All right, everyone, that is our show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Tell everyone about the show. We love to have new listeners and viewers wherever they are. Tell them about how great this show is. We love you for being with us. We want lots more people with us as we grow. And of course, the Big Ideas Book Club, which is great. Lots of interesting conversations there. We've got a few really good ones already in the archive. Lots more to come. So follow the Big Ideas Book Club too. And we will see you back here next week for the next edition of The Steve Hilton Show.